Now it's time for something different.
Welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of the Hot Death Horror Podcast. This week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with a fantastic filmmaker, director from Acres Films. I have Matthew Schmidt coming on this week to talk about the short, The Challenge, that is currently available on YouTube, and it is part of a full-length feature titled Tales of Found Footage, which can be found on Prime Video. So without further ado, I will bring the man on here. Welcome, Matthew.
Great. Thank you for having me, Dustin.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I was happy that you reached out to me, and when I made my silly little post there, so I was happy to hear from you. I'd seen you post your short a few times in the big found footage group there on Facebook, and I watched it quite some time back, and it's very entertaining for sure. It's definitely found footage, and it kind of, what I liked about it is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it kind of takes the whole social media challenges thing and and spins it into something that these kids didn't want to necessarily get into. So, and the thing has, I'm going to say, over 19,000 views on YouTube, which is fantastic. I can't seem to get there myself, but um how does that feel, knowing that you made something, you put it out there, and over 19,000 people have seen it, or maybe somebody's watched it 1,000 times themselves, I don't know, but it's got it's got a ton of likes. I didn't see any dislikes on it. So I mean, how's that feel to know you created this thing, and it, people seem to be liking it?
I mean, it feels great. And thank you for the compliments you threw at it in the beginning there. Yeah, it was part of a feature-length film called Tales of Found Footage, where it was one of three stories. The with Tales of Found Footage, it was kind of set up like a Tales from the Crypt type setup, with a host and a person introducing each each scenario with a comical twist. When Tales of Found Footage was released, it was actually the second film I directed. The first one was Happy Birthday Hannah, which is also on Prime still. And that was full length found footage. But with Tales, it was, because it was three separate stories, everybody kind of picked out their favorite. But the challenge by far was just overwhelmingly positive and everyone's favorite. And then with the other two, some people liked one, some people didn't like the other, and vice versa. But the challenge was just so popular. And Tales came out pretty much at the tail end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning of 2020, as everybody knows, the pandemic hit and we were all stuck with pretty much nothing to do for a while. So while I was brainstorming on the current film that I'm working on, I was like, okay, well, since I've really got not much going on, let me at least just experiment and have a little fun and take the challenge, separate it from Tales, and just release it as its own thing, because of the overwhelming positive response to it. So I did. And again, even on YouTube, it's been an overwhelmingly positive response. I will correct you, there are some dislikes on there.
Okay.
But the likes very much outweigh the dislikes.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I'm extremely happy with the challenge. I'm extremely happy with the response to it. And it's just, it just causes you, when you hit something and hit a nerve with people, you get somewhat addicted to that feeling, and you want to create more and hopefully create better. as you go on.
Yeah, it's for sure an addictive feeling. It really is. It's easy to catch that filmmaking bug, especially when you have some positive responses to what you made. Um, what what was the inspiration behind it? Is this based on a true story? Is this, or did you just kind of okay, there's all these silly challenges on social media. Let me make something up and have these two teenage girls go in here and do this thing.
It was a combination. It was there's some truth behind the fact of the hotel itself where I
Okay.
filmed, which is supposedly haunted.
Mhm.
I'm not making a claim either way. I could tell you that we filmed there for months and nothing happened to us personally, but a lot of people have claimed incidents. So because I was friends with the owner and it's a seasonal hotel because it is in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is mainly a summer tourism town.
Mhm.
So because it's seasonal, the owner said, "Hey, if you're more than welcome to use it while we're in our down months during the winter." So I jumped at the chance, and she couldn't have been more gracious. And it's right above a bar. It's part of the same bar. It's the Irish pub in Atlantic City. If anybody wants to look it up, and you can stay there. It's a working hotel. Um, but with the real life haunting, and when I would go up there from time to time just to look at it before I even decided I wanted to make a film there, I looked at the long hallways, I looked at the antique decor and everything, and immediately in my head, being a major horror fan, I'm like, this is a mini Shining. This is a
Mhm.
mini Overlook Hotel. That's what this looks like to me. And I was like, I just have to do something here. And when I combined that with, at the time, 2019 was, I would say, probably the height of these internet challenges. I saw like a cinnamon challenge, a big lips challenge, all these things. So I'm like, well, what if somebody took a challenge to do a haunted hotel and with dire consequences? So it was very, I wouldn't say it's inspired by a true story, but it's obviously inspired by true, true life. What's the word? Or not events, but true life goings on.
Sure. Okay. Well, and I yeah, talk about location. That was one of the first things that grabbed my attention about it. I was like, okay, they found a really badass location because it's you see. I mean, there's a ton of found footage, right? And you see a lot of things in the woods. You see a lot of things in abandoned buildings. You see, but yes, there are a fair amount of found footage films that are made in, currently occupied or, operating businesses, but I, I don't think I've seen a whole ton, filmed in creepy hotels. So is that was that the place you had in your mind all along? Was that like, okay, I've got to do this here, or was there basically? I mean, did the story come first, or did the location come first?
I'd say in all honesty, the location came first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had already made the one film, Happy Birthday Hannah, which was it was very much inspired and, um, very much inspired and influenced by the paranormal activity movies.
Okay.
Very much that style. And with Happy Birthday Hannah, it was almost like, okay, here's my first attempt at this. Let me, see if I can do it. And then once I pulled it off, then I was like, okay, now I want to take the next step and just get even better. So when in a sense, stumbled upon the hotel above the Irish pub, um, I was like, wow. I was like, this just has to be filmed. And it's something like I was talking about earlier with the creative bug. Once you get that in you, they kind of call it a photographer's eye, but I would say it's more almost like a filmmaker's eye. All of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, every time you go someplace, you kind of you kind of think to yourself, hey, what could I possibly use this for? This is a beautiful setting or a beautiful scenery or something. This would make a great shot for a scene like this or that. So the setting came first in this case. Um, and then I gotta say, it's funny because it's like, I hear a lot of songwriters say that they make these complex songs and they just get buried on the album. And the
Mhm.
songs that were just easy, that they went in 5 minutes and started hitting like basically chopsticks, like that
Yeah.
simple of a tune, all of a sudden becomes a huge hit. Well, with the challenge, it was kind of similar because it was relatively easy because everything kind of fell into place. I'm like, I have this amazing location that's just begging to be filmed. And
Mhm.
I have a very simple idea that's extremely popular right now that I could roll right into it. Plus, I'm already in the found footage genre. So this is just it was just one of those natural marriages that came together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about having all the ducks line up in a row. That you're fortunate, man. Because I can tell you, at least in my experience, location scouting is kind of that's still something I'm working on myself. And you have to have that. I think it's very important. Location is, in my opinion, I'd say location is probably 70% of your film, if not more, because I think you have to have a great location for number one, for it to be believable, for atmosphere. You want people to feel unsettled and uneasy, and you want people to have that ew, kind of gross feeling. And not that hotel was gross, because it wasn't. It was beautiful, but it gives you that feeling like
You know,
I wouldn't stay in that place, and these teenage girls are going up in there doing this, like how did they do with filming? Were they getting kind of creeped out at any certain moments? Or, I mean, obviously they knew they were making a movie, but I mean, was there ever any time where they were kind of like, I think I hear something?
well, yeah, well, quickly before I address that with the location, I gotta credit my producer with coming up with one of the best lines about the challenge, and he said, "The location is the star of this segment. There's no doubt about it," and I agree. So what you're saying to just affirm your point about location, it's true. The location can be the star. As far as the girls were concerned, no, they were having a blast. They
Okay.
they were kid in candy stores. They really were. They were running around. They absolutely loved it. The only thing that slightly creeped the one girl out was something that we stumbled upon accidentally, and that was the painting that ended up looking almost identical physically to one of the girls. And then
Wow.
we ended up using it in the movie. That she notices it, and it kind of creeped her out, but it was like she was so excited at the same time because we're all like, oh my god, it was another one of those things that just lined up for us.
Yeah.
um, so fortunate, lucky. I mean, we just got lucky in a situation like that. But no, they were great. And I think the only thing is, when if we would leave a piece of equipment on a certain floor and the rest of us were on one floor, I was always the one who had to go up and get it. Nobody wanted to go upstairs alone. So that was about the extent of the creeped out. But other than that, like most horror sets, when you hear like interviews with actors, even from the famous movies, oh, were you scared? Were you scared? You know, very rarely are they. Usually they're surrounded by lights, they're surrounded by people. It's just, and usually the people are joking around. I know famously, the girl who played Annie Brackett, uh, Nancy Loomis from the original Halloween.
Hmm.
They were like, "Were you ever scared anytime?" She's like, "No, Michael Myers is hilarious to me even when I see him on screen because I know it's Nick Castle, and Nick Castle was such a funny, goofy guy that it makes me
Right.
laugh." And I could see how that's very true with most horror movies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If the person behind the mask, or what's going on, it's probably, you're not going to be too creeped out by that. me personally, I get creeped out, by locations and things, and I think I would definitely walk into that place, and yes, I would be excited to be filming something there, but there would be a part of me that would want to just kind of go and investigate, like let's roll the cameras for not for the movie tonight, was there ever any of that where you guys like, let's try and catch something.
No, not because it wouldn't be interesting, but just simply time factor. We
Sure.
were so focused on the project that we just didn't do it. But I've been up there when I was originally checking out the locations, and even though I didn't actually experience anything, you can't help it. You feel creeped out. But again, that turned into like a cinematic excitement for me because I'm like, okay, if I'm feeling this and I'm a grown man walking upstairs and if I'm feeling this, I'm like other people are gonna feel it
Mhm.
too. So
Yep. And that's what you want. You want them to feel that. So job well done on that, because it was definitely well done. A lot of short films. That's kind of the thing about short films is, at least the ones that I've seen, they're either really really fantastic, or they're just like, I don't know about that. And you're definitely on the former side of that.
oh, thank you very much.
I, I enjoyed it. I watched, like I said, I watched it a while back. I did a rewatch after you reached out to me. Said, okay, I got to watch this thing again, see if there's anything I missed. Because it does have rewatch value, and it's funny that you say that about the painting too, because I was kind of wondering about that. Like, did you guys have to have that made? But that was just already there.
Accident, pure luck, pure
Wow,
luck. And I think
happy
it was
accident.
I think it was actually a maintenance man working in the building who said, "Hey, she looks just like that girl in the painting." We're like, "Oh yeah, she does."
It did, yeah. So okay, so you mentioned working on a new project. What's next for you and Acres Films and things? What have you got in store for us?
Well, I got introduced to a an app or a software program for like and it was called Filmic Pro. Because when I started, obviously I started in found footage for my first two films, and there was a very much a purposeful reason behind it. Not only do I really enjoy the genre, and I feel sometimes it gets a little bit of a bad rap, um, but I also felt okay, this is what's in my capabilities. Because I've seen some low budget horror films and they look like low budget horror films. And I'm not talking necessarily, not necessarily the acting or directing or scares, but just the general look. It doesn't look like film. It looks like video a lot of times. So I'm
Right,
like,
the
okay,
production value, yeah.
let me stick with found footage because that at least, if I tell people it's found footage, there's an immediate acceptance of budget restrictions,
Yep.
which I have because it's me and it's one of my best friends helping me as a producer, but we're limited with our resources. Um, but then when I was introduced to this app slash software called Filmic Pro, it basically can turn almost any um, iPhone or iPad camera into a film style camera. You can control the frame rate, you can control the shutter speed, you can control all these different settings and really make the product look cinematic, look more like film, like genuine film.
Hmm.
So when I discovered that, I'm like, okay, let me not go from 0 to 60 here. Let me experiment with something. So I made a short film with my daughter. I think it's about 2.5 minutes long, called "Run Hannah Run." It wasn't a horror; it was just a quick inspirational film for her,
Hmm.
which I threw up on YouTube. And I was like, okay, let me just experiment. And again, um, it's weird because it didn't do well on YouTube, but it did well on Facebook Watch for some reason. I don't know. Sometimes these algorithms confuse me, but
Hmm.
it's you know, it came out so cinematic style that I'm like, okay, now I know I can actually do something cinematic. So I was like, okay, now I know I have somewhat of the capabilities even with limited resources. So the new movie is a horror movie, but it'll be my first cinematic style horror. It
Okay.
looks like I'm in post production at the moment. It looks like it's going to be about 35 minutes
Okay.
long. It's called Mr. Sandman. And the only thing I can reveal at this time is the premise, which I believe has a universal relatability to it. And I'll just ask you a question. When you were a kid, did you ever experience falling asleep on the couch in the living room, and you wake up and it's the middle of the night and your parents have gone to bed, and you have that long, terrifying journey of getting from the couch to the safety of your bedroom? So I think almost everybody I've talked to has experienced that so
Hmm.
far. So I think
Hmm.
it's a very universal childhood fear. But we all know that nothing's actually in the darkness. It's just that we're kids and we're terrified of it. Well, what if something was in the darkness? And
Hmm.
that's the actual premise of Mr. Sandman. And I'm hoping to release it. Um, Post production is a lot more difficult on a cinematic style feature,
Right.
because of the amount of shots you're dealing with. Found footage, you kind of point and shoot. My producer actually calls it theater, almost theater acting, because you're kind
Hmm.
of like on a stage and you're just rolling the camera and you just say go.
Hmm.
Whereas if you watch any cinematic style movie, within a 60 seconds, there's about a dozen different shots. So for each of those shots, you have to set up the angle, the lighting, the microphone, everything. So it took a lot longer. And it's taken a lot longer in post production because of all the different things we have to do. But um, so that, in fact, will be our next project, and hopefully by this spring.
Okay. Well, that sounds. I'm in. I'll tell you that because I have had that experience. I can't think of a child that hasn't. My kids have all done it. They hate it. Because we try to wake them up. I think every parent can vouch for that. We try to wake them up. Hey, let's go to bed, but they don't. They're not having it. They don't want none of it. So it's like, well, you're too big and heavy for me to carry you all the way upstairs or wherever. So the couch it is. This is where you're sleeping.
Yep.
So yeah, I know that fear well, so I can definitely relate, and it sounds very intriguing. I'll tell you that. So I'm excited to see what you've got going for that, and it's going to be a cinematic style. So congratulations to you on taking that step because that's a big one. Like you said, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work to make a found footage, but it's like even more so to do a traditionally shot, cinematic film. So I applaud you for that, sir, because that's a task. That is a
Yeah.
task. And are you a jack of all trades type of guy like myself, where you do your editing and everything, kind of one man show it?
Um, I don't want to take credit away from my working partner. He does
Okay.
help a lot. But yes, I do dip my toe into everything. The From the
Mhm.
writing, from the directing, from the cinematography, from the sound, the editing, you name it. I try to learn as much as I can on my own. But he's a huge help, so I don't want to try to make
Sure.
it like it's all me. I don't want to take anything away from him. But
Sure.
yeah, it's but even with two people, you're talking about two people with full-time jobs, full
Mhm.
schedules. um so to take that and try to do a cinematic, even 35 minutes, it's we've been working on it since 2021. So if
Oh
that gives
wow.
you any idea.
Yeah.
Whereas like the found footage, we would shoot in the spring and release by the fall. It's just not the case with this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I applaud you for that, because that's a big step. I think I love found footage. It's my favorite subgenre of horror, but I like all horror. I watch everything, So me personally, I don't know if I'll ever take that leap, because it's it's a little intimidating for me. I know right now definitely I'm not ready to try a cinematic traditionally shot movie.
Well,
I know I'm not
I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it's not a lot of work, because it
there.
is. However, I would encourage you to at least experiment with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would download, Filmic Pro. I would just go on YouTube to learn how to use it. That's pretty much how I do it. YouTube is phenomenal for teaching you how to do things. It's also phenomenal. I use Final Cut Pro for my editing, and anytime I
Okay.
run into a problem where I'm not technically like a master at anything. So anytime I run into a problem, I simply YouTube it, and they 9 times out of 10 they have the answer. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I even what you're doing, like a podcast, I wouldn't know how to go about that unless I YouTubed step by step how to do it. So it's a great tool, but I would encourage to maybe at least try what I did and make an extremely short film
Mm-hmm.
of anything you want, because again, Run Hannah Run was not horror. It was just something it was an experiment, but it was an inspirational film, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I as much as I am a fan of horror, I'm actually a fan of movies in general. I'm just a
Right.
huge movie fan, and I'm very much in love with all genres. Horror is one of my favorite genres, and again, it's within my capabilities at the moment. Because when you're talking about scaring someone, one of the first things that I learned, um, and I learned this when I tried to tap my hand at screenwriting, was that you want to make it primal. So when we're talking about Mr. Sandman that'll be coming out, the whole primal fear there is the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's not a taste thing. That's something not a it's not a culture thing. It's a primal thing. It's deep within our DNA. We all humans, no matter where you come from, will fear what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
That's why something like Jaws was so effective, especially the opening scene. It's what you couldn't see under the water that was so terrifying. Is like your mind fills in what's going on under the water. If you look into a dark room, especially as a child, your mind is going to put a full figured monster in there, whether
Yeah.
there is or not. So when you hit primal nerves, that's when you tap into fear. And I just think it's such an effective tool, and um, it, it's difficult because so much stuff has been done, but at the same time, I don't want to get discouraged by that because it hasn't been done by me, or it hasn't been done by you, and that's such a good way to look at it, because even something like Star Wars was based on some of King Arthur, some Japanese story about a father and son. Everything is drawing inspiration from somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
don't let something like that, if other filmmakers are listening right now, don't let something like that stop you, because everything's been done. It just hasn't been done by you yet. You bring your own voice to it. But I would encourage anyone to try to make whatever they can primal, because primal is universal, and it hits everyone.
That's that's a fantastic way to describe how to do that process. Hit hit the primal fear nerve. So that's some advice I'll definitely take myself, in my filmmaking, because that's good. I like it. I really like it. It's you're an intelligent person that you sound like you know how to create a good scare and create fear for somebody. So I look forward to seeing it. I really do, man.
Well, I appreciate that, but I mean, honestly, I'm a novice and I'm learning, and I'm just trying to get better with each film. That's my goal. If I can take a leap with a noticeable leap with each film, then I feel like I'm doing my job, and I feel like I'm happy with it. But it's funny because Primal doesn't have to be strictly with fear. Primal, there's a reason why Rocky is popular to this day. Why it constantly replays on AMC over and over again. The feeling of accomplishment, the feeling of overcoming odds is a primal, the feeling that you are meant for something greater than what you've become is a very primal urge in all humans. And it just makes something like that so effective. So no matter what your story is, make it primal and you will hit that nerve. You will.
That's beautiful. I got goosebumps actually. I really do. That's a good speech. I love it. Okay, so now what you said that you're an avid horror fan. And we, I won't do the age guessing game or anything on you, but we look like we're probably both around the same age. Um, 80s horror is my thing because that's when I was brought up watching it. Is that kind of, were you a kid and got into it then, or was it a later in life thing?
Yes, I am Generation X. I have no shame in saying I was born the year Jaws came out, 1975.
Okay.
Yeah, 80s horror is a lot of fun to me. I love 80s horror. It is so entertaining to watch. I would still say some of the best horrors came out in the 70s. You take The Exorcist, you take Jaws, The Shining was right at 1980. You take Halloween, which was 78. You take The Omen, which was 76. Um, when it got to the 80s, there was more exposition. It was more exposition horror, and again, I love it for what it is. I my favorite vampire movie is from the 80s, Fright Night. I thought the story was brilliant. I thought the setting was brilliant. The idea, and it touched a nerve with me because it's like a horror fan has a real life monster living next door to him. I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. And
Yeah.
I fully credit Tom Holland with knocking it out of the park with that film. I'm even a fan of the sequel. I know it's somewhat underrated, but I think it's actually an excellent sequel. But 80s horror is a lot of fun, and it's funny because there's always that debate of like highbrow versus lowbrow. And I just think that if you make a good movie, whether it's fun or scary, even in the horror genre, you could still love it. You take something like Army of Darkness, I'm not scared by it, but I love it. I absolutely love Army of Darkness. I know a lot of people are more Evil Dead fans. I
Right.
personally thought Army of Darkness was my favorite one, but hey, teach their own. But um, so I absolutely love the genre. I love. I'm a big. I think Wes Craven was brilliant, especially that whole concept of Nightmare on Elm Street. You want to talk about primal? Everybody has to sleep. You
Mm-hmm.
have to sleep. There's no escaping that. Um, you want to talk about an 80s horror, not in the slasher genre, one of my favorites, Poltergeist. The
Mm-hmm.
most unassuming, unthreatening type of haunted house you can imagine. Suburbia. Beautiful California suburbia with the sun shining. And they
Mm-hmm.
made it terrifying. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's amazing to me some of the stuff they pulled off in the 70s and 80s. And between the 70s and 80s, I personally feel and I know I'm a little biased because it was when I grew up, but I personally feel it was the golden era of filmmaking. I feel like it's when filmmaking truly hit its peak. I really do.
I couldn't agree more. And again, not just because I'm biased as well, because that's when I grew up. But I agree with you. That's 80s horror to me, and 70s horror as well. 70s and 80s horror. It was made at a time when technology was kind of getting a lot more advanced, and they could do a lot more things with it too. So I've said it many times, like in my in my personal life, if I were born 10, 15 years earlier and I could have been a teenager in the 80s, I don't think I could have been any happier. So I really don't, because there was just a lot of stuff to experience in that particular decade, and I'm glad I was around for it, but I was a little younger. So I was born in 81, so I'm a little younger, but
Well, hey, look at it this way. If you were a teenager in the 80s, you may not have gotten the joy of Transformers and He-Man and G.I. Joe. So we got spoiled. We got great stuff out of it. So it's
this
okay.
is true. This is true.
And we were
I was in I was
teenagers when grunge hit. So we had that too.
And funny you should say that. I live in Houston, Texas now, but I grew up in Washington State, kind of in the Seattle area.
Okay.
Uh, so
So you were
Nirvana,
there.
Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all the grunge bands. That's where all the big ones came from.
Yeah,
So
91 was, I mean, although it's grunge isn't the only thing I like, but 91, it feels like our generation gave the music industry grunge, and it's a pretty cool thing to hang your hat on.
it is, yeah, it is, and that was a cool area to grow up in when all that was kind of blowing up. When Kurt Cobain came out and just kind of, I don't know, he didn't really kill the 80s hair metal, because it definitely stuck around, but people that were into the 80s hair metal heard Kurt Cobain, and I think it was either like you either loved it or you hated it. It's like, oh, this ain't real rock, or it's like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Me, I was on the latter. I was like, okay, I like this. Even at a young age, I was like, I really like this. And then I found out he was from there. He grew up in Aberdeen, which was maybe an hour and a half from where I lived. I've seen his house, so that was pretty cool. It was bittersweet. It was sad and happy, because it's like, okay, this is the house that everything went down in. So, and you can't see it from up real close. You have to see it from like a park, kind of a little ways away. But it was just really cool growing up in that area of the world, knowing that that's kind of where it was born. So
Right.
that was a neat feeling. I was definitely a grunge fan in the 90s growing up. And that was a fun time as well. But horror, yeah, 80s horror, 90s grunge. Yeah, man, we're on the same wavelength there. We definitely are.
Well, it's funny because it's like 80s horror got to the point where there became like slasher fatigue,
Yeah,
especially got to the late 80s where it became just more about just kill instead of any
yeah,
type of story. And therefore slashers had to go away for a little while. So that but it's they only went away so that people could miss them, because then later they end up coming back with Scream in a big way.
yeah,
Scream brought in a lot of nostalgia, which again, the brilliance of Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, the writer, of course. Um, it just brought that 80s nostalgia
yeah,
well into the 90s. And, it was one of the first times I ever saw a self aware horror film without being parody. So it was like scary and funny at the same time. And it just knocked it out of the park. And then you have something like, so that was 96. And then even later in 2003, when Freddy vs. Jason came out,
hmm,
a huge hit, because all these people just were like, so they had missed their horror slashers, and it's like here they were. But it's not so much that it was a scary movie, it was fun, it was like a celebration of the
hmm,
slasher. you know you even take even something more recent, 2018, when Halloween came back. Once Jamie Lee Curtis came back in it, it people flooded to the theaters. They
yeah,
wanted to see that classic good versus evil fight come back again. So it's things go away, like the hair metal bands. They go away for a while and then they come back in a big
yeah,
way. And some people will call it cyclical. I've always thought that certain popular things have to go away for a while so that people can miss them, and then
Right.
people come back. And then, of course, obviously, there's the keyword nostalgia, that
Yeah.
always.
Nostalgia. Yep, for sure. Um, so going back to found footage, what I guess what was the first one you saw that was like, whoa, this this home video type stuff is can actually be really good. Mine was the Phoenix Tapes '97. That was the first one I saw that blew. I had seen the Blair Witch. I had seen things prior, but I wasn't really a found footage fan until I saw that movie, and I was like, okay, this can be good. So what did it for you? What found footage did it for you?
I mean, it was Blair Witch. It definitely
Okay.
was Blair Witch. Because I went to the theater, um, not knowing until after I came out of it that it was because they presented it as a real story. The
Yes.
marketing campaign around it was present, so I didn't know. There wasn't the internet. It was there, but I wasn't huge on the
Right.
internet yet, messing around with it to know.
AOL.
Right, to know that it was a hoax, dial up at the time. I think I still had, and so I was like, wow, okay, that was really effective. And a lot of people bashed it at the time because they're like, well, nothing happens, nothing happens. I'm like, yeah, maybe because I could totally picture me and my group of friends doing something very similar, that it became extremely relatable for me. So even though, yeah, you couldn't see much or almost anything, it it really just hit that nerve with me that it was like, okay, I could totally see us doing that. And then years later, then I kind of forgot about the genre for a while because really nothing, nothing big came out. And I didn't have streaming service yet, so I wasn't aware of anything. And then, of course, 2010, I believe it was, Paranormal Activity hit, and I was like, wow. I was just blown away. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, how the hell did they do that? I'm like, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. So I was blown away. But it wasn't until years later that I started trying my hand at screenwriting, and I started sending out scripts and stuff. And it's not that I was getting read and rejected, it's just that I wasn't getting read because I was a no namer. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I was scrolling on Facebook one day and I see an ad that someone must have purchased for a found footage film called Bad Ben. I don't know if you've heard of the Bad Ben
I
series.
have, yeah. There's like
Okay.
9 of them, I think.
Yes. I lost track. But so I started watching the first one because I think the ad said if you love Paranormal Activity, you'll love Bad Ben. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I have Amazon Prime now, I'll give it a shot. I watched it, and in about 10 minutes in, he mentions Atlantic City Electric, which is our local electric company around here. So I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my God, he's local. So I look him up, and I find him on Facebook, and I reach out to him, and we exchange numbers, and I call him. I'm like, oh my God, how'd you get on Amazon Prime? Like, how does this work? How did it, I knew nothing about this. And he's like,
Mhm.
so he explained the whole process to me. He said, actually, they're very friendly and open to independent filmmakers. You just have to meet certain technical requirements. So I
Mhm.
was like, wow, and I saw the response, especially the first Bad Ben was getting, it was getting a lot of positive response. So I was like, wow, if I could do something similar, maybe I could parlay this into my screenwriting career and, actually have someone get a meeting or have someone listen to me or whatever the case may be. So that's that Bad Ben and the creator, um, I really owe a big debt to because he opened my eyes to the door of independent film streaming.
Mhm.
So I was like, let me jump on this and let me start, chasing a dream that I didn't think was possible because I thought you're either in Hollywood or you're out, you know.
Right.
And so I just jumped on it. So it was really those three that hit different benchmarks in my life. And so those three really jumped out. But there have been some absolutely brilliant films. Lake Mungo was
Mhm.
fantastic. Um, the Poughkeepsie takes was very disturbing, but very well done.
Mhm.
I think I saw one. Megan is Missing, also very disturbing,
Oof,
but very well
yeah,
done.
that one's brutal. For those
Yeah,
that haven't seen Megan is Missing, yeah, go in cautiously. It
yeah.
is, yeah. Sorry to cut you off on that, but yeah,
No, it's okay.
that one. You mentioned Megan is Missing, and
No,
that one,
it's a tough one.
it's a that's a tough one to get through.
Yeah,
I had read about it and things because I have a little bit of morbid curiosity when it comes to horror movies and things. I'm like, okay, let's see what Google says. What are some of the most disturbing? What are some of the most scary? And Megan is Missing, Lake Mungo. They're like on all the lists.
right.
So anyway, yeah. Sorry, I'll let you finish, but yeah, Megan
No,
is
no,
Missing.
I was just thinking
Woo!
off the top of my head some of them that hit me in a certain way. Hell House
Mhm.
hit me well, landed on me in a good way. I think even though for some reason it got bad press or at least bad reviews from what I read, but I thought it was pretty good. Was the uh, Behind the Sightings, the clown. Uh,
Okay, I haven't watched that one yet.
I thought it was good. I thought it was entertaining, but I found footage just it gives you a very it kind of takes me to the 70s in a weird way because the 70s had a very raw quality to their
Mhm.
filmmaking, and found footage kind of gives me that similar feel. It's very raw, it feels very real. It's a lot more improv acting, which we used on both our found footage films.
Mhm.
um and it's just very there's something very unsettling about found footage. So it's a different type of horror. You don't. It's not the creep out factor, and I'm not saying you don't get creeped out, but you almost get unsettled a little bit,
Mhm.
which is a great tool. That uneasy feeling is a great tool with found footage. But so yeah, some of those that's just off the top of my head. I apologize if I'm leaving some great ones out. I have watched a bunch, but I just think it really is a great genre, and it really opens it up to independent filmmakers and lets them kind of explore with even limited resources.
Definitely able to pull off some good stuff with limited resources with found footage for sure. I mean, like you mentioned, Bad Ben, Nigel, is that? I can't remember his last name. His name's
Yeah,
Nigel.
Nigel Bach.
That's right. Yep. People love that series. People absolutely adore that series. I haven't seen all of them. I think I've seen through four. Was four Batter Ben? I think.
uh I think I can't I honestly can't remember.
Yeah,
I think
there's so many of
I've
them.
seen three or four of them myself. But I could say that he was like I said, just very extremely helpful to me. And I think what he said was he felt that he was surprised that people found him so entertaining and so comical because he's cursing a lot through it and getting angry at
Yeah,
the things and stuff
yeah,
like that. So it is like a horror comedy. But at the same time, sometimes when you're just watching all the different security cameras, you're like looking and you're like, is something going to happen? Is something going to happen? And it was the
yeah.
same effect as Paranormal Activity. So I give him credit. Definitely the first one, he really knocked it out of the park.
Oh, he.
Um, so, I give him a lot of credit, and he's a good guy, and he's definitely been very helpful to me whenever I've needed a tip. He has no problem returning a text or call. So,
That's awesome, and I love to hear that too because I've met some great filmmakers along the way that have helped me, and it's nice to hear that those people are out there that they've found a little bit of fame themselves. They've you know and that they'll take the time to talk to somebody that they've never met, but we just we have a passion and a camera. It's like I want to learn how to do what you did because with Bad Ben I think it's so believable, because it's almost like you are watching an actual video of some guy that just recorded a bunch of paranormal stuff happening in his house.
Yeah.
If you didn't know any better, like say there was somebody that didn't know what found footage was, they would I would think it was real if I didn't know any better. I'm
Right.
like, at first I'd probably, what is this? But low budget is kind of my jam. Like I like low budget found footage if it's done right. If it's done right, I think the lower budget the better because it adds more believability to it. It makes it, people perceive it as what it is. Like, okay, is this real? I don't know.
Well, and that's why I'm a big believer in improv when it comes to found footage as opposed to scripted acting, because I think it adds that realism. And with the two girls in the challenge, again, this is just something we just got so lucky with. Not only were they good actresses, but they had an instant natural chemistry. And I know you haven't seen it in a while, but the opening scene, which is in their bedroom where they're discussing what they're about to do, that was actually our first night filming, and we really didn't have to do much coaching or coaxing with them. They just naturally had chemistry and went right into it. We told them, like, here's a few points we need you to hit, and other than that, we want you to have fun with it. Be two girls having fun, filming yourselves, joke around, and they knocked it out of the park. So it was something. Again, lightning really struck with the challenge, and I wish I could take full credit, but there was just a lot of luck involved. There really was, and we ended up working with a lot of great people and a great setting and stuff. So but improv is just it's so good when it comes to found footage because it gives that real feel.
Yeah, it gives that authentic, performance. I guess it makes it feel more authentic. So. All right. Well, I know I'm taking up a lot of your time, but I got a couple more questions that I'd like to
I'm
ask you, if
good.
that's okay. Okay.
I'm good.
Good deal. So, in the found footage world, as we know, this can be kind of a hot topic. Music and found footage. Where do your loyalties lie?
Yeah, you're right. That is a very controversial topic.
Yeah, it'll piss some people off for sure.
Um, we did use music in the challenge, but it was because a record was playing.
Right. It was diegetic.
Right. Yeah. I personally would not do it as a filmmaker because I feel it takes you out of. I think you're taking the audience out of it because the whole purpose of found footage is to feel real. Yes, everybody knows they're watching a movie. Everybody understands that, but you still want to achieve a feeling with your audience. And the few times I've seen it done, the fact that I had to tilt my head and be like, well, why would they do that? A friend of mine brought this up, and I think it's a good point. If you have anything that takes you out of the movie for whatever reason, it can really cause you to not enjoy the movie as much and not get the full effect of whatever the filmmaker is going for.
Right.
So I personally would avoid music unless there is a legitimate reason, like we had like the record player going or a radio on or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Unless it's ambient music coming from someplace, I wouldn't use it because then you're trying to cross genres, subgenres of found footage and cinematic. And we kind of tried to do that. We didn't add music, but we kind of tried to cross genres with the other two stories that were in Tales of Found Footage, and they just did not have the same reception or effect that the challenge had. So me personally, I would avoid it. But it's such a fine line you want to walk because you never want to stifle creativity, but I would, and believe me, I'm no expert, so I'm still learning a lot of things myself. So I don't want to sound um, like an expert here, but if I notice something that just doesn't feel right, I'd rather point it out, because that's what I would like people to do for me, is at least
Hmm.
point it out. I'm not saying I want you to make the film for me. I'm not saying I want a film made by committee, but at least point it out so I can be aware of it and be like, okay, this affected them negatively, and this is why. Is it something I'm willing to risk as a filmmaker, or is it something I'm like, oh, I see what they're saying, and let me make that adjustment?
Okay. That's yeah, and that's definitely a very, very fair and, accurate opinion. Because when I first started out doing found footage, which wasn't very long ago myself, it was only about a year ago that I made my first movie. And there's still a part of me that says, there's rules to found footage, right? Like no music. There has to be a reason the camera's going, which I'm a firm believer in that one. There has to be the reason the camera's going. But the music, I'm less on the fence as I was, because when I first started, I was like, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna be different and break found footage rules, and that did not work well for me at all. And I still think that there's creative ways that you can kind of break found footage rules a little bit and get away with it. Um, like you said, if it's diegetic, if someone's listening to headphones, or if there's a song playing on the radio, or like in your case, the record player, that's okay. People can accept that. But I mean, there are people that will just, I mean, they will skin you alive if you think about putting music in a found footage movie. And I tend to agree with some, but I tend to disagree with others, right? I think, especially with ambient noise, if the movie is good enough and the ambient noise is placed well enough, I don't think a lot of people even notice it, because one of the the series that you mentioned, Hell House, I mean, that has a gigantic fan base, and they did it in that. It was very subtle and it wasn't often, but like especially in the new one, that was one of the first things I noticed in the new one, the Carmichael Manor. I was like, there's ambient noise in this. This is supposed to be found footage, kind of, but they kind of blended, genres in that one. I think more so than the other three. I think they kind of blended it. But
Yeah, I actually haven't seen the new one yet, so I'll try to keep an ear out for that. I'm curious to
okay,
see.
yeah. I mean, that's the spoiler free version that I gave there. It's very good. It's amazing. If you liked the first one, I think you'll love the new one.
Okay.
The second and the third, I mean, they're great. They have their place in the series. I won't say I loved either one of the second or third ones, but they were good in their own way. But the first and the last are phenomenal, I think.
Good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. Um, so, and this is just kind of a fun question that I ask everybody that I have on. If you were given, say a major studio approached you and said, "Hey, we love what you did with the challenge. We're interested in what you've got coming out with Mr. Sandman. Like, we think you're a very smart guy, you're an intelligent person. We think you know filmmaking. We're going to give you this many millions of dollars, and we're going to let you take your pick of one A-list actor.
Mhm.
What movie are you making or remaking, and who's that A-list actor going to be?"
Wow.
It's a tough one. I know. It's
So when you say A list, does that mean there can't be a bunch of others that are not A list but still have a name?
so yeah. No, it can be filled with nothing but Brad Pitts and Matthew McConaughey's and The Rocks. It can be filled with all those guys, but you get to pick your main character.
Oh, okay.
You get to pick the guy or the girl, the woman.
Okay. Um, this is actually relatively easy. because I did mention my screenwriting earlier.
Mhm.
The two feature-length screenplays that I wrote would require the full Hollywood machine behind them, because of budgeting and stuff like that. And the first screenplay I wrote, because I didn't. eh, Everybody said, "Oh, a lot of people said, well, don't write that because it would be impossible to make, and you have to get all these people together, and there might be some copyrights that all have to be bought up and stuff like that,
Sure.
or licensed out." Well, I'm also a believer in don't not. First of all, it's not your job as a writer to worry about copyrights and what have you. But also, don't not do something. I'd rather do something and knowing that I did it and not have it go anywhere than never do it and then see somebody else do it 5 years later and being like, that was mine, you know?
Missed my chance. Yep.
So I wrote a screenplay called Horror. Um, and I can give you basically the tagline. It's a movie loving cop gets assigned a homicide case about a serial killer who is copycatting all the famous 80s slashers to take out the final girl of each of those films.
Okay.
So, if I could make that screenplay and the opening scene would have to be Jamie Lee Curtis, I would make that screenplay. But the reason I asked about the other name actors is because I also have Adrian King in the screenplay and Heather Langenkamp in the screenplay and Nev Campbell in the screenplay. So it's ambitious, but I would have kicked myself if I never wrote it. So if
Sure.
I had one shot, I'd be like, I've got the script ready to go. Just give me the money, get me the rights, whatever I need, and let's do it. Because I can't imagine any horror fan on anywhere on the planet not wanting to see that. So, did you ever see the movie Copycat
I did. Yep.
years ago? Okay, so he
Sigourney
was
Weaver, I think.
yes, he was
Yep.
copycatting all the famous serial killers.
Uh-huh.
Well, this would be very similar, but he'd be copycatting all the famous slashers: Jason, Michael, Freddy, Ghostface, you name it. So,
Okay.
um, that and it was a horror comedy. Very much in the vein of Scream, very self-aware, but not to the point of parody. I would make my screenplay in a heartbeat, because that would be just that would be top of the mountain for me, ultimate dream. There's very few things. Although if I to be perfectly honest, if I ever got my shot at a Batman or Superman film, my head might explode from excitement. But that would be on par with that. That would be top of the mountain for me.
Okay. Well, I like the response, and you have a screenplay, so yeah, you're right. That was kind of easy for you because you've got a great idea and a great screenplay written for something. And again, that's another thing that I would watch because it sounds very very fun. If nothing else, that sounds like it would just be a blast to watch all those famous people from all those movies in this movie where a guy is copycatting all the stuff they were in. Now, would they be playing themselves?
Yes, they'd be playing themselves. So he's going after
Okay.
the actresses,
Okay.
in real life. And when all's said and done, I'll be more than happy to email it to you, and you can read it at your leisure.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I'd love that. I really would. Thank you. That would be great. It sounds awesome. It sounds right up my alley for sure. So,
I, I,
um,
I, I yeah, I think again, I think if I pulled it off correctly, I don't want to, say that it may
sure.
not, it, a great idea is a great idea, but if it's not executed correctly, it's not executed correctly.
Right.
But I'd have a hard time believing that if it's executed correctly, it wouldn't be every horror fan wouldn't want to see it. So
Yeah. Agreed. So, all right, man. Well, last question. What's your favorite cryptid? Or who, I guess I should say. I don't know.
hmm.
And if you don't have one, that's okay. But
No, it's interesting because I would say that my and we're not talking supernatural, right? We're keeping it to physical creatures.
Yeah, yeah, kind of just
Okay.
folklore, Dog
Okay.
man, Bigfoot.
Okay. I think of course I'm probably gonna get any of my fellow Jerseyans are probably gonna give me crap for not saying Jersey Devil, but um honestly I think my favorite might be and it's because I could see the possibility, the very real possibility of it existing because of the unknown would be like the Loch Ness monster, only because it's so hard to prove or disprove because of the depth and murkiness of Loch Ness. So
Yeah.
um I can't fake it and say I believe in Bigfoot, but I could see the possibility of the Loch Ness monster.
Sure. Okay. Not a lot of movies made about Loch Ness either. So that's kind of a shame.
No.
There's some, for sure, but kind of a shame that there's not more because I think that's a very interesting cryptid as well. I've always been kind of a fan of Nessie. Um, Bigfoot, Nessie. Those are kind of in my top as well. So interesting. All right, man. Well, I really, really do thank you for your time and coming
Oh,
on here.
thank you for having me. It's been an honor and a
Yeah.
pleasure, and I love talking films. So I get, I could keep going with stuff like this.
I know. Yeah, I could too. I could talk all night, and especially about horror and things like that. I could really go a long way with talking about that. So, and you're easy to talk to about it, so that it would be a good conversation for sure. Um, but
Well,
real quick, where
I would love to come back sometime. That's for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's do it again for sure. Um, where can people find you? What on socials or are you do you
Yep. I am on. I guess all the major socials. I usually have two accounts on each. Usually one for myself, one for Acres Films,
Mhm.
uh, the production company. Facebook, Instagram, X. This new social media platform, Slasher, which is all horror social media, which I
Okay.
think is pretty cool. So I did join that a while ago, and it's actually really cool. So if you haven't checked that out yet, that'd be something to check out.
Okay.
Uh, I I don't check them all with the same frequency as some of the others. Sometimes more than the others. It just depends on my time allotted. But yeah, I'm pretty much on them all. I guess yeah. Acres Films is on TikTok too. Um, anywhere I can, because if I don't promote my stuff, who is, so I
Right.
gotta be everywhere. So
Sure. Okay. Well, hopefully, your story has fallen on, somebody's ears that needed to hear it, as far as inspiration because you're an inspirational guy. I think that you're on the right path for sure. The way you've started out and the direction you're going. So hopefully, somebody will hear this and go, okay, well, that guy had the cojones to reach out to Nigel from Bad Ben. So I hope you get that opportunity to, maybe pay that back or forward or however you say that one. But, hopefully somebody will need that advice and you'll be able to give it to them the way it was given to you and because you're an inspirational guy. You're fun to talk to, and I appreciate your time, and I definitely would like to do this again.
no, thank you, absolutely, and I hope I I hope that I hope that everybody takes their shot because honestly, I don't think it's a. I think if somebody sees my movie, it doesn't mean, or if somebody sees someone else's movie, they're not gonna say, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna watch this person's movie now." I don't think it's that type of genre. I think there's room for all of us, so I hope everybody takes their shot, and I hope everybody makes it because I think there's room for all of us in movies.
We share the exact same belief, my friend. I've actually said that there's room for all of us at the table.
Yep.
You know, there's gonna be jealousy, and there's gonna be, some standoffishness between filmmakers. It happens at times, but I'm right there with you. I think that there's plenty of room for everybody to come in and eat.
Yep.
We can all get a piece of it. It doesn't have to be only people with money can do this thing, or only Hollywood can do. So yeah, very well said. And we hit an hour and 10 minutes, so that's great.
Wow. Look at
Yeah,
us.
it flew by. So
It
again,
did.
I'll let you go for real this time, but thank you so much, and I appreciate you taking the time to come chat with me, and we will definitely set up something in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
All right, Matthew. Well, we will talk at you later. All right.
Okay. Take care.
All right. Have a good weekend.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.